is your boy CIZZ, you dig, live action, back at it again with another episode of what was formerly known as the Culture Talks podcast, but I have recently changed it to the Colin Stutzer Show. Colin Stutzer podcast, Colin Stutzer Show, whatever you want to call it. And ladies and gentlemen, I won't be mad if you continue calling it the Culture Talks, because listen, that's just a fact. The culture does talk. And you see what I'm rocking right now. We got the VOV sweatshirt on, you know, the signature CEO CIZZ. I don't really like wearing it that much because it makes me feel a little, what's it called, braggadocious, or I don't know. Who put CEO their name on their back? I think it's kind of whack, but I also kind of like it.
I see what you mean by that.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I think it's a little bit whack, but I also enjoy it. So.
But I mean, it's a branding. I mean, you don't have do you have your name on the back or anything?
Yes, like that? It is. That's what I'm saying. This right here on the back, it says CEO CIZZ. You know, it's kind of just a little thing for me and my co-founder for the t-shirt brand to rock. You know, I have his name on the back of his and my name on the back of mine. Just a little, you know, little thing to be like, yo, we did this. Or we started it at least. I don't know what it means by, you know, we did this. But either way, ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening to this podcast right now, I appreciate you because we are on episode, what is this? I think this is episode 89, I believe. So ladies and gentlemen, if you are rocking with me all the way to episode 89, and you're here for the dope guest that we have on today to drop gems and talk about his life, you know what I'm saying? Y'all should be happy right now. And if you're watching this on camera at home, ladies and gentlemen, please look at how fresh my guy is. And ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know who my guy is, go ahead and introduce yourself to the people, my boy.
Oh yeah, for sure. So my name is Nathan Roberts. I was born and raised in Columbia, Missouri. Came up here in 2016 to study economics at UMKC just because they have a great affiliation with the Federal Reserve. 2 years into the program, realized that wasn't what I wanted to do, switched into business admin and focused and had an emphasis in real estate. So I actually read this book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad at 17. It's a mind-changing book for most people that read it, right? And that's what actually got me down the career path of wanting to be on the ownership side of real estate. And just attending all these different events around Kansas City, started meeting up with all these professionals, and I kept getting the same recommendations. Hey, have you ever thought about actually getting in on the brokerage side and helping investors acquire properties before you actually have your funds or all your things put together to actually be on the ownership side yourself. So took that recommendation, got licensed at 20 years old, so 3 years ago, and yeah, it's definitely been a process. A lot of lessons learned, definitely in the beginning, because when you're young, it's a lot harder to actually get out there and get clients, but things have worked out quite a bit. And they're well now. So
I love it. And matter of fact, you know, I did not know that you were younger than me because I feel like I'm younger than everybody in the world. Like, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing that I feel younger than everybody, but typically I'm the youngest person that's on the show. So
yeah,
shout out to you for being brave enough and confident enough to jump into such a gritty game, because as much as, you know, real estate's talked about, you know, on TV, on these, you know, fancy this, fancy that, you're gonna make millions of dollars today as soon as you get your license. Like, it's a hard game. It's a hard game. It's a hard hustle. And, you know, you were in school still when you got your license. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So how did you balance both finishing off your degree and also like trying to get, you know, acclimated to the real estate industry and getting to know people and make contacts and network? How did you do both of those at the same time?
So for me, just because I was a student in the block school and they had a real estate emphasis or course load that you could do, they had partnerships with like CCIM, the Urban Land Institute. So CCIM, every third Friday of the month, they have this breakfast at the Mission Hills Country Club. So it's literally the top brokers here in Kansas City. And it's a super cool meeting just to learn about the projects that's going on around the city and things that are actually happening, right? And that was a breakfast that I got to go to for free just because I was a student at UMKC, and that was great to be involved. So yeah, there was a lot of organizations that just offered free memberships to students or people in college. So I definitely take advantage of that, because I know when you're young, I tell people all the time, try to learn as much as you can about the industry or career path you want to go down before focusing on the money, because the money will eventually come, but just perfect your craft first before you you get out there and you're hungry for the money, because it will come, like I said.
Right. the name of any game is, you know, if you learn it, you understand it, you acquire knowledge, and you put in the work, eventually, as long as you're consistent, the problem is a lot of us struggle to be consistent, but as long as you're consistent, that bread is gonna come. And I think, you know, what the biggest challenge is for a lot of us, especially nowadays, is that expectation to have that money flowing really quick just because of social media and seeing people, you know, I got my real estate license yesterday and today I'm a billionaire. Like, what, bro? No, you are not. But
we have like crazy sales,
right?
The first
Crazy
year.
sales in the first year, and you know that may be 1 in 300,000 people that actually make crazy sales the first year. But the reality is, you gotta hustle. You gotta be consistent. You gotta learn the game. You gotta create your network, and we'll jump into how you did all that even further in a second. But before that, you talked about growing up in Columbia, Missouri. So let's talk about that experience. What was, you know, some people call Columbia, Missouri a city. I call it a college town. I call it a small college town.
It's a college town, yeah.
Exactly. So what was that experience like, you know, being young, all these college students around town during the year, and then the town becoming a little less, more empty during the summer? Like, what was that experience like there? What was, you know, the community like? What's the diversity? Just talk about your experience in Columbia growing up, you know, through high school, and some of your favorite and some of your non-favorite experiences there.
I would say, I mean, Columbia, like you said, it's a college town, so it's definitely great growing up in there just because it is a very diverse community. It's not really like Kansas City. Like, Kansas City is very diverse too, but obviously we know of what's considered the true divide, right? How there's lower socioeconomic classes on the east side, and then it gets higher, and it tends to be more white driven on the west side. It's not really like that in Columbia, and that's one thing that I loved. I mean, there were 3 primary high schools. There was Hickman, Rockbridge, and also Battle. I mean, all 3 high schools were very integrated and diverse, so that was one positive. But growing up in a college town, just because it is where the University of Missouri is, it's a party town for the most part. So when you're in high school and you know a lot of people that are freshmen or sophomore in college, you tend to go to those festivities at MU. So it was definitely a fun time to grow up in. Trying to think of some of the things I didn't really like about the town. I'm a people person, so with Columbia, because it is so small, I mean, you can go all over the city and you're going to see someone that you know. And I feel like Kansas City is starting to get like that in a way too. But yeah, I mean, if you're looking for more opportunities and stuff like that, you have to look at where the economic drivers are coming from and who the top employers are. And for the most part, that's MU. I mean, the university in the health system up there. But in Kansas City, there's so many different industries that are intersected, so there's a lot more ample opportunities up here.
And is that kind of what you like realized when you were, I know you mentioned you were interested in economics at the time, and UMKC had a good program with that, but is also knowing that Kansas City was kind of a city with more opportunities across a few different industries, another reason you decided to come down this way? Did you plan on staying in Kansas City after you were done with school? Because, you know, a lot of people would be like, why didn't you just go to MU, man? It's
I get that all the time.
School. It's a way huger school, like, or, you know, it's a more recognized school. So I know you mentioned economics, but was there anything else that fed into your decision to leave and not go to University of Missouri?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, it comes down to your goals and your aspirations at the end of the day. Knowing that I wanted to be on the ownership side of real estate, and I'm a firm believer that if you go to a university or college, I mean, your college days is when you're out there making a lot of those connections, right? So I think it's good to stay in the city that you went to school at, because you already have those pre-existing connections. So that was one of my drivers, but I would say the number one thing was their affiliation with the Federal Reserve. At one point in time, I mean, I knew I wanted to be on the ownership side of real estate, but for my active income source, I thought about becoming an economist. And I know for that process, I mean, you're looking at 6 to 8 years in school. And just being in the program, I realized that's not really the career path I wanted to go down. And a lot of people get caught up into the status quo of a position, right? A lot of people want to become doctors or attorneys because it's a high prestigious white collar position that a lot of people are recognizing as one of the top positions up there. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to become an economist, but then I realized that's not truly who I am, and that's not what I'm going to enjoy doing. So despite how much money I'm making, I want to actually have a career path that I enjoy doing, because it allows you to have that continuous motivation to go forward.
Absolutely, I love that. That's a great point, because a lot of times people, instead of taking into consideration their passion, their purpose, or their true interest, or what actually fits their skills or their interest, what they instead look at is what's gonna make me look good to society, what's gonna be what's most flashy, what am I gonna be showered with compliments for if I decide to go down that career path. And so they, I'm not saying everybody does this, I'm just saying a lot of individuals do this, oh, I'll be a lawyer because I know my mom and dad are going to be like, my son became a lawyer, or I'm going to become a doctor because I know my parents are going to be like, oh, doctor, yes. Or like, they go down these things based off of what the community is going to think about their decision, and not so much about what's truly in their heart. So I think that's a good point that you made there. So when did you decide, what year was it, how old were you when you read Rich Dad Poor Dad? Because for me, I think I read Rich Dad Poor Dad very recently, and I've always been interested in investing. I've always been interested in ownership, but mainly because of influences from hip hop. Really growing up, it's just like I own this, I own that, and then I knew I wasn't a rapper or NBA player, so I was like, what other options do I have? So I did research that taught me about other avenues of building wealth, such as real estate, such as buying and owning businesses. So I kind of have the baseline understanding of that, but the mental framework that Rich Dad Poor Dad gives you is so powerful. And I think I read it 2019, since I moved back from LA, so fairly recent. I was like 22, 23 years old. So when did you read it, and talk about the domino effect of what that book had on your life?
So I read it in 2015. This was the summer going into my senior year in high school. Just trying to figure out what my plan was going to be after school, because your junior year is when you need to decide like what career path you're going to go down. So I was just doing a lot of research, just trying to understand because I grew up, I would say lower socioeconomic class. I wasn't middle class. I was definitely considered poverty, but I didn't grow up in the inner city. I grew up in Columbia, Missouri, and that's a little bit different atmosphere when it comes to you being on a lower socioeconomic class status, right? So just trying to decide what career path I want to go down, and just doing a lot of research online through books and ways you can actually try to accumulate wealth. Because as you know, there's a huge racial wealth divide in this country. And that's one thing I was looking into, and I stumbled across Rich Dad Poor Dad. A lot of it was recommended through Bigger Pockets, which is like the largest online real estate forum. But I was just doing some research, read across that book, and I was like, oh wow, this book is going to teach me how to become wealthy. That was my mindset going into it. And I mean, it just teaches you the truth about financial literacy, which is completely different. It like reverses what you were taught in high school, right? You get taught to find a job, invest in a 401k, get a W-2 income job, and just stay on that career path until you're ready to retire. And a lot of people don't understand that the quickest way to build wealth is to have multiple income streams. So I realized early that being on the ownership side of real estate would do that for you. After reading that book, it was a mind changer for me. I was like all gung-ho about real estate, and just trying to figure out how I can get my foot in the door. And I mean, the three biggest things you need for real estate, you need the know-how, right? You need to know how to actually execute a business plan. You need to have the financial resources, and you need the property. I would say out of all three, the hardest one's going to be finding the deal. Getting the capital is going to be the easy part. I mean, as long as you can find an opportunity and showcase to investors that there's potential to lead to more growth and value, I mean, people would be willing to give you money all day. So, that was the mindset after that book. I mean, you either save or, I mean, one of the big things that they told you in the book is having delayed gratification, right? I mean, there tends to be a direct relationship with how much money you make and how much you end up spending on liabilities. And that's I would say that's probably the biggest issue that keeps people from acquiring wealth, is they make a lot more money, so they want to spend a lot more money. And that's a huge issue, and it's kind of hard to get with people and get them to understand like that is not how you should be building wealth. Number one, you should be building multiple income streams, and then number two, you shouldn't be spending all the money you have. Put some money aside for investments.
Right. And there's so much to dive into from what you were just stating there, but I'm gonna follow my script here and jump back into some of those things you were talking about, because a lot of powerful statements within that. So you get your real estate license.
Yeah.
I have a question that I don't actually know the answer to, which is, I don't know why I said it like that. Either way, so residential real estate, commercial real estate. Do you have to get 2 different licenses?
No, it's the exact same license, which is like crazy to think about because there's a lot more rules and regulations and things you need to go through on the commercial side. So it's one of those industries, I mean, you probably know at this point, it's a white male dominated industry. It's kind of hard to get into it unless you have a mentor. And I've had 2 people that's had a great impact on my career so far. But there's not really, I mean, there's resources out there. I mean, there's classes, courses and stuff like that you can take, but those are thousands of dollars. But I would say the biggest free method, I mean, bigger pockets, learning how to actually analyze investment properties. And then there's like CCIM, SIOR, there's like destinations or courses you can take. Again, they're thousands of dollars, but I think the biggest thing is that if you understand the math side of things, then everything else kind of just falls into place. But with most things, I mean, it takes experience. A lot of things you can't learn through reading a book or taking an online course. You kind of have to have a mentor that's kind of guiding you through the process.
Absolutely. And so what were, aside from, how did you find your mentors first and foremost? Because what I was going to ask right there is for individuals who are like, no, I want to be on the commercial side. Yeah. I don't want to be on the residential side. I want to be multifamily properties. I want office spaces. I want big commercial buildings. I want big apartment buildings, right?
Yeah.
If someone's going down that path, they get their residential real estate, license, and they learn primarily about residential.
Yeah.
And then they're like,
because for the most part, the valuation of residential properties, those are based on comps. On the commercial side, it's not. I mean, it can be based on comps if there's no income being derived from the property, but for the most part, it's taking the cap rate approach. So the income divided by the cap rate, that's what gives you your property value.
And for the listeners out there,
yeah,
let's break down what comps are, and let's break down cap rate, which you just said right there. So let's make this a real actionable little podcast. So break down, first off, what comps are, how do you run comps, and what do you mean by residentials or ran off comps and commercial side?
So on the residential side, what I mean by comp just means comparable property. So if you're looking at a 3-bed, 1-bath property in, let's just say, let's just say Hyde Park area or something like that, then you need to be finding another 3-bed, 1-bath in Hyde Park. If there's not a lot of comps there, then obviously you can go up in size a little bit. So if you're comparing a 3-1 to a 3-2, then obviously you need to take off the value of your property because the subject property has less square footage or less amenities than the other property. So all a comp is, it's a property that is very similar in the same neighborhood that has sold within the past year. Okay. The most recent it is, the most accurate it's going to be because with real estate and stocks and any investment vehicle, there's cycles to it. So right now, I mean, we're in a crazy time when it comes to residential properties, and a property is worth significantly more now than it was last year, just because of appreciation. I mean, and that's also due to laws of supply and demand too, right? On the commercial side, it's value based on the income approach. So what I mean by that is people buy commercial properties because they want to make a return on it. People aren't buying it to live in it. Right. So what a cap rate approach is, that's essentially taking caps. A cap rate is kind of similar to a rate of return that you're looking for a property. So if you were to say an 8 cap, then it's kind of like the rate of return you would receive on that property that is not accounting for any loan payments or anything like that.
And so 8 cap is essentially saying an 8% return on my investment. That's
assuming that you paid for the property all cash. Yeah, okay, that's what that means.
Gotcha.
But in reality, it's not really that way because you still have expenses that are going to vary based on the neighborhood or city that you live in.
Okay.
The location.
Okay, and so understanding that off top for somebody who's trying to get into the real estate world or just got their license, Where are you learning this at? Are you reading a lot of books? You said there's courses, but they're thousands of dollars. You said mentors are an option, which you had too. So let's start there. How did you find your mentors? How did you reach out? How did you make contact with them? And then maybe share some other avenues. Someone who's a new real estate licensee but wants to go on the commercial side. Some learning opportunities that or resources that they can utilize moving forward.
So I'll start with the resource side of things. How you can actually learn this information, I mean, it's through Bigger Pockets is the largest online real estate forum out there. So if you have any questions, honestly, all the questions you're probably going to ask has already been answered. So you can search that in the forums, and you're going to see all these real estate professionals that are providing recommendations or advice for what you should be doing in your particular situation.
Shout out Bigger Pockets.
Bigger Pockets is great. That's how I learned most of my things in the beginning. They have quite a few books. Like if you want to flip houses, they have the book on flipping houses by Brandon Turner.
Currently reading the one on getting rental properties with no money down.
Okay, no and low money down. Yeah. That one's a great book too. But there's another one called, and it's probably my favorite book if you're trying to be on an analytical side and actually know how to underwrite properties. It's called, it's a book by Frank Gallinelli. He's like a Yale professor or something like that. It's like the 36 key financial metrics that every real estate investor needs to know. And I'll get that exact book title for you, but it's by Frank Gallinelli.
It'll be in the description, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, perfect. That book is a mind-changing because it teaches you, I mean, cash on cash return is the easiest analyze metric you can use or tool. But there's internal rate of return, which can get very complicated. You definitely need to have a thorough understanding of that. But to give you the true definition, the internal rate of return is the discount rate at which the cash flows are equal to the net present value of zero. To most people, that doesn't mean anything.
Right.
Essentially what that means, to break it down and simplify, it's the analyzed rate of return of an investment, accounting for the time value of money. So that can get pretty complicated. It's not something that you're going to do by hand. You use computer software like Excel. There's formulas that you can put up. So with a lot of the underwriting that I'm doing, I essentially put together a pro forma or a spreadsheet, and I just plug and play the numbers, and it spits out these the returns at the end of the day. But as far as the returns that you need to know, I mean, there's three main ones. Cash on cash return, you need to know the internal rate of return and the equity multiple. Equity multiple just says for every dollar you put in, how much you're getting back in return.
Okay.
But to stay on topic, you were asking about mentors. I mean, that comes through just building relationships. If you want to get a mentor on the commercial side, go to where they go. And that's just commercial real estate events around the city. CCIM, like I said, that's a great organization to be a part of. ULI is the Urban Land Institute. They have essentially tours or walkthroughs of buildings or projects around the city. They also have like morning coffee connects, and there's a variety of topics that they go through, but they also have they literally have mentorship programs too. So I was in 2 of their programs so far. I was like 19 years old. I was in their Ekin Johnson's mentorship program with ULI. They literally pair you with a professional. It wasn't really a one-on-one thing, so that was kind of odd. They just teach you about what industry you want to go into and some of the methods you can go to actually be successful. And then they also have another one called, they have the Young Professionals Mentorship Group. They have all these mentorships group, and they're super affordable too. I mean, it's probably like a 6-month mentorship program, and it'll cost you about $200. So not bad.
Yeah, not bad at all.
Especially if you want to get on the commercial side, right? But yeah, like I said, go attend all these different events that most commercial brokers attend, and you'll start meeting the same individuals. And that's one thing with most industries, right? It's a small, tight-knit community. One event that they go to, that a lot of professionals go to, they're going to be going to the other ones. So you start seeing the same faces over and over, and then you just start building relationships. When you're super young, you're at an advantage, right? When you're like 20 years old and everybody in the room is 40 plus, you stand out number one. And yeah, a lot of these guys, they'd be willing to take you out to dinner or lunch just to talk about, is this actually something you want to get into? And they'll let you know what it took to actually become successful, because it's hard. I mean, it's a dog eat dog world out there when it comes to commercial, and you definitely need great mentors that are going to help you out. How do you decide who's going to be a great mentor? I mean, look into their background. See if they're a top professional, number one. You don't want someone that's going to be mentoring you that doesn't know what they're doing, or they're half-assing what they do. So look into them, ask around. I mean, knowing that professionals know other professionals, ask around. Hey, do you know so-and-so? Oh, I met with them the other day, and then you just have a casual conversation about it. But the biggest thing is building relationships, and when you're young, it's a lot easier because you stand out, number one. And people, when they're older, you're just willing, you want to give back in a way, right? So a lot of people are willing to mentor you in that process. Now, if you go up to them direct and be like, hey, can you be my mentor? They're going to be like, I don't know who the hell you are. Like, get out of my face.
Right.
But it's something that takes some time to build. Like, just every time you see them out and about at a real estate event, just be like, hey, what's going on, Bob? I remember this is when I met you, and this is how you've had an impact. You gave me this advice, and this is what I've done with that advice.
I love it. I love it. And one thing, ladies and gentlemen at home, that I want you to kind of pay attention to that he said right there is that when you're young, you stand out. What that says to me is that there's not enough young people going to these events.
Oh, there's not. It's crazy.
He just confirmed it right there, ladies and gentlemen. So what that means is you need to be the individual who decides to go out of your way to put yourself in uncomfortable situations to get around people you don't know, to get out of your little box and communicate and network and go to these events and be that young individual that's in that room of 40 and 50 and 60 and 70-year-olds who are, industry, vets. Because not only are you going to be an individual that stands out because they want to give back, as a lot of people want to give back, but you're also they're gonna notice, oh, this guy's 20 years old, the next youngest guy here is 35, he wants it, he's hungry. I promise you guys, he is not the only 23 or 24-year-old commercial real estate agent in Kansas City, but he might have been the only one that went to these events. And what does that say? That tells you that he was hungry, that he desired to acquire knowledge. And you have to be that same type of individual. Stop thinking that there's other people out there your age, that are all willing to work hard, because that's false. And when you assume that and then you decide to not go work hard, you end up being just like them. So be somebody that stands out. That's something that's
and you gotta put yourself in uncomfortable situations. Like, it was weird going to those CCIM events, those breakfasts. Everyone's old as hell, number one. It's a white male dominated industry, and they see some tall black kid, and I stand out, number one, so they're just like, who is this guy? I've seen him around, I'm not sure what he does. Let me go talk to him and see what he does. Now, it's gonna be an uncomfortable situation because you don't know anyone. You're walking to a room with all these guys, and a lot of these guys are millionaires, so it's kind of hard to be like, just walk into the conversation and know what questions you should be asking to have a constant dialogue. But it's something, you just get used to. You might ask some stupid questions the first time, but then eventually it just gets easier.
You learn, right? You learn, but you only learn as you take action. And that's the most important thing here. Bigger Pockets has so much information, but you know what? There's still millions of young people who will instead just go comment under, people's, successful real estate people's Instagrams that have millions of followers and no time to respond, and they get pissed at them for not responding when they could easily just go to Bigger Pockets and find all this information. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I do understand that it might be challenging to understand this information, but at least if you have that baseline knowledge or understand the wording or the terms, you can take that, go to these events. Now you have something that you can present to have dialogue with individuals. That's the one thing I always told myself and try to tell my friends when I'm feeling like they're asking for advice is, you got to know the chessboard like the back of your hand. Like, you got to know the terms in the industry. You're not going to know everything if you're just getting started. But one thing I do, I don't have any properties. I'm not a real estate agent. I don't particularly plan on becoming one. But one thing I try to do is I write down in my notebook all these terms in real estate. Write down these terms, try to learn the definitions, try to take notes, and then when I come into conversations with people, whether old or young, I can at least kind of understand what they're talking about. He mentioned cap rate. I'm like, okay, I know what that is. But I'm not a real estate agent. I don't have any properties, but I know what it is because I want to know the chessboard of, like, the back of my hand of things that I want to acquire knowledge in, and that's what I suggest other people do. It's like, we really got to just take action, learn the baseline, and then we'll learn more in depth about how to utilize that information or those terms when we meet people and network and connect.
And there's all these different channels, right, that you can utilize. I mean, there's podcasts, there's books out there, there's events, there's face-to-face meetings. Like, attend all of them, especially when you're young, because you start hearing the same information over and over, and that's how it actually resonates in your head. You hear one thing one time, that doesn't help you out. One verbiage or term for the industry, I mean, yeah, you have it for right now, but what about all the million other terms out there? So just try to integrate yourself in all things commercial real estate, if that's one of your interests.
Absolutely. And to talk a little bit further about, about commercial real estate, I want to talk about the niche areas, like the industries within the industry, if that makes sense. So we have office spaces, we have apartment complexes, we have co-working spaces. Like,
so there's 4 primary property types. There's office, there's retail, there's industrial, and then there's hospitality, which includes hotels and stuff like that. Obviously, there's these subsectors of those too. I mean, with multifamily, it can be a duplex, or it can be multifamily residential, which is 2 to 4 units. It can be commercial multifamily, which is 5 units and above. With office, I mean, you can get into mixed use where you have, let's just say, retail or office on the ground floor and then retail above. Like, there's all these different niches that you can go down.
And so, first off, I don't know why that just made me excited, but yeah, I love hearing mixed use properties, just because one of my goals in life at some point is I've always wanted to. Have you ever been like a kid and you've been in like a shopping mall area in New York City, or just to give a direct example, been in River Market or something like that, or a City Market, and you're just like, oh yeah, this is a restaurant here, but what's that up the stairs? Like, why do I see people casually walking downstairs with their laptop and stuff? And you figure out that somebody lives upstairs, and that I've always wanted to like own a bodega in like Brooklyn and live upstairs and like just have a mixed use. Is that what it's called? Mixed use property?
Yeah, mixed use.
Yeah, see, look, learning terms today.
So all these different property types that are in one building.
Yeah, and so that's just always been such a cool thing that I've kind of like wanted in my life. So one day it's gonna happen. But I want to ask you, what's your? I don't know if you are focused on a specific niche in commercial real estate or not, but are there any, of those 4 that you mentioned that you're really interested in, or that you focus on specifically, and just kind of talk about that?
Yeah, so there's 2 niches or property types that I focus on. It's multifamily and office sales and leasing. On the multifamily side, I mean, that deals with all things multifamily, two units, a duplex and up. That could deal with trailer parks or mobile homes. I mean, it's a wide spectrum. And then I also do office leasing. So I do actually have a few office buildings for sale. So I sell office buildings as well, but for the most part, it's office leasing. Okay. So working with companies that actually help them find space.
Okay, got you. And that was going to be my next question. You kind of answered that right there, because that can be anything. That can be one person who owns one business and wants to get an office. That includes the type of people you work with too. I just want to say I was like, oh, I need an office to run the College Stutzer Show podcast, Media Empire, right? And so you'll help people find properties there, and then you'll also help PlexPod try to find. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I mean, I'm actually working with a lot of smaller tenants right now. I'm not sure if you're aware of the Location 1 building off of 63rd. It's essentially a new developer, a new owner just came in, bought the building, and they're getting rid of a good thing for a good thing. So it's a Location 1, it's a building of primarily minority-owned businesses. They're essentially being forced to relocate because I can't really get into the plans of but the talk around town is that they're going to be tearing those down and making those affordable housing. So a lot of those tenants, knowing that they're minority-owned businesses, and the rents are super cheap. Like, you can be in a 500 square foot office and it's going to cost you $300-400. No, the cheapest rents in the market, essentially. And we're actually trying to help them relocate to surrounding buildings based on some of the requirements. So that's been a little bit difficult, but just because some of the requirements, as far as price range isn't going to fit because that's not what's available out there in the market.
Right.
But a lot of what I've been doing is talking to a lot of owners of like co-working spaces. So there's a few out in KCK. There's the Staples KCK. There's a few in like Midtown. I mean, these are like small mom and pop co-working spaces that most people don't know anything about.
Okay, that's interesting because I didn't know. You know, the only ones I know in the Kansas City area are like the big,
FlexPod,
WeWork, and there's one other that I think is built in the One Light building or the Two Light building. There's one right. I don't know if it's in the building, but
there's one called the Kessler building. That's all co-working space.
Yeah, man, it's crazy. So in the office space, how has it been? You know, since 2020 March.
Yeah.
How did that affect you? What did you have to learn? How did you have to pivot, adapt? Because that's one thing in the real estate world that's been talked about a lot. People transitioning to remote work, to offices telling the people they don't need to come in anymore, to people not being even allowed at the beginning to go into these co-working spaces. So what did that look like for you? And just talk about that experience over the past 2 years.
I love that question because I actually came onto the commercial real estate side back in October of last year. So prior to that, I was on the residential side. And knowing that my focus, and I get to choose what properties types I want to focus on. I mean, it was primarily multifamily at the very beginning. Started switching over into office, got a few office listings. But yeah, I mean, activity has definitely started picking up recently. When it comes to companies, I mean, it depends on the size of the company and culture. I mean, culture is the biggest thing that's keeping most companies wanting to have office space because a lot of companies are deciding to do like a flexible work model where employees, they're probably working from home a few days a week, but they still have to come to the office probably 2 days a week. So it's a great way to alternate out your employees so not everyone's compiled into the same space at one time, especially with issues related or dealing with COVID. So definitely in the beginning of this year, it was definitely hard because I had some office listings and they weren't budging. Like I'm cold calling all of these office owners or these company owners, business owners, and I'm getting responses, but a lot of them are like, oh yeah, we don't really know what we're going to be doing in the next year or so. So they might have a lease that's expiring this summer, but they don't know. I mean, it all comes down to getting with all the employees and talking it over with them to see what works best for them. But at the end of the day, what works best for the employees isn't always what's best for the company and the shareholders and stuff like that, part of the company. And it kind of comes down to having that conversation, like I said, with the employees and figuring out if you can still have innovative progress or collaboration and seeing how your employees perform when they're at home. With some companies, I mean, they've actually seen an increase in productivity. Some have actually seen a decrease. So it depends on what sector or what industry you're in. That dictates if you need office space going forward or not. Personally, I believe I'm very bullish on office. I think I think what's going to be considered up and coming is probably going to be the co-working space because it offers so much adaptability and flexibility for startup companies. You may be in a small space starting out, but if you bring on all these different employees and you want to grow and have that culture, and it's a lot better to come up with ideas on products and designs in person than online because online is kind of weird. Everyone sees you. Any conversation you have, it's not really one-on-one. And it's not like you can go up to let's just say Gene in the office and be like, hey, what's going on, Gene? How was the weekend? It's not something you do online. It's more an in-person interaction. And that's what a lot of companies are still trying to figure out, even to this day. I mean, that's honestly one of the questions that I like to ask business owners is, hey, how do you see your office coming along in the next few years? I mean, what are your plans going forward? I know, and then I talk to them about stats of what I'm seeing with other companies here in KC.
Yeah, and you were kind of moving into the next few questions I wanted to ask anyway, so look at you, ahead of the game.
Thank you.
So I wanted to ask, how do you pre-qualify buyers, and like what type of questions are you asking to really understand their needs to see if you can even help them in the first place?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so on the commercial side, it's completely different than residential. So in residential, you pretty much have a pre-approval letter or pre-qualification letter from a bank. On the commercial side, it all depends on, I mean, the number one question I'm asking is what experience do you have in the commercial space? If you want to acquire a 5-unit, so what's considered commercial for multifamily, if you want to acquire something that's 5 units or above, I mean, it comes down to your bank statements at the end of the day. How are you going to be acquiring this property? Are you doing a 1031 exchange process? Are you using all cash? Are you doing, I mean, what method? Are you using bank financing? Oh, if that's the case, what bank have you spoken with? And if that's the case, then I get their contact information and I contact the bank just to see what's the likelihood that they would lend on a property that meets these requirements. So it's a lot of just vetting, looking at bank statements if they're purchasing all cash. There's a bad word in the industry when it comes to syndicating because everybody wants to become a syndicator. Everybody wants to start acquiring multifamily properties with none of their own money. They want to raise all the capital. I'm just like, okay, if you're doing a syndication model, show me some letters from your investors that are saying they're willing to do this if you acquire this type of property. I mean, if you don't have those letters, there's not really much I can do for you because at the end of the day, if it's a listing that I have and a buyer's interested in it, I need a lot more information from you just to make my seller comfortable. So it's a lot of questions that you're asking just to understand their experience. If they don't have the experience, what team do you have behind you? Because if you don't have a team behind you, you don't have, I mean, the 3 biggest things you're going to need someone that's out there searching for the properties. You need someone that needs to understand the analysis of it. You need a contractor, you need a property manager, you need a full service team because obviously you going in and you're trying to take down a 20-unit property, you're not going to do this by yourself.
Right.
So, I mean, if you like the experience, what experience does your team have with acquiring these properties? And if you can't showcase that you have experience or you have the know-how of acquiring properties, then it's not something I'm even going to spend my time on because there's a million buyers out there. Buyers are the easiest clients to get. Now, finding the properties is the hardest thing. And when I have a property and I have a list of hundreds of buyers, it comes down to which ones are a priority for me. So which ones are clients? So I break it down into 3 categories. Clients are people that I have a buyer, rep, or agency agreement with. Then there's priority prospects or buyers. Those are individuals that have a track record of acquiring properties. If you don't have a track record, you're going to be on the lowest tier, and I'm not. I mean, I'll send you properties that none of the other top tiers don't want to look at, but you're not going to get the best properties because I have no faith that you're going to be able to close.
So that makes me want to ask this question. So let's say there's an individual never invested in commercial property yet. Matter of fact, just not that there's anything wrong with renting, but just rents their house, doesn't own any residential or commercial property. But they just came upon some cash. Unfortunately, grandpa passes away. They get $250,000 cash. They got it. It's theirs in their name, and they want to go invest in some commercial property.
Okay.
What do they need to do?
So the biggest step,
they haven't done anything yet. They're not even in the world of real estate yet.
Well, the number one thing is you need to learn what you're doing. I mean, one thing that I like to do is put together pro forma statements with my clients. I don't do it for them because that's a huge liability on me. If something happens, it's like, oh, you thought I was going to get these returns. Well, I mean, the whole point in me underwriting is based on a lot of my assumptions, but it comes down to understanding what your requirements are. If you tell me that you're looking for an internal rate of return of 12%, yeah, we can find properties that fit that requirement, but do you have the know-how or the team to actually take that project from acquisition through the business plan to disposition when you decide to sell? So, I mean, the number one thing is, do you know how to underwrite properties, and do you know anything about real estate? What is your strategy? If you can't tell me what your strategy is, I can't put forth any effort into helping you out because all the liability is on me. If I just sell your property, you don't know what you're doing, you buy the property, I mean, there's no faith that you're going to be able to execute the business plan. I'm probably not going to even have any interest in you. I might meet with you for a few minutes, realize, hey, this guy isn't going to go anywhere, and just give you recommendations like, hey, these are the first 3 things you need to be doing. You need to know how to execute a business plan or understand what strategy you're going to utilize. There's a core strategy where you're acquiring a property, not much money that you're putting into it, it's pretty much going to be the cream of the crop, A class, B class, something that doesn't need a lot of fixing up or repairs. That's like a long-term buy and hold. Core Plus would be, there's a few things that you need to fix up, like capital expenditures. That can be the roof, might be older plumbing, something like that. Value add, that's essentially a huge play where you're acquiring a property. It might even be cash flowing at that point in time. So you might have to use a bridge or mezzanine loan in order to acquire it. And the value add strategy, it's kind of like a BRRRR, which is very autonomous with bigger pockets. You're going to buy the property, rehab it, rent it out, refinance, and repeat that process. So by repeating that process, essentially what you're doing is the money that you use to acquire that property, you're pulling it out because you raised the value of that property. So, I mean, there's two strategies you can do to get your money back out. You can sell the property, which you have all these capital gains taxes that you need to pay off, or you can do a 1031 exchange, where you exchange it to a like or similar property in size and value or higher. So, I mean, with the value add, the main things you're gonna do, I mean, that might involve painting, changing out the floorings, fixing up the exterior or landscaping. You might be doing something to the interior of the units to increase that valuation there. I mean, that might entail updating the kitchen or bathrooms. But one math thing that I give people all the time, just to put things to perspective, when it comes to a fiveplex, or let's just say a 4-unit, like I said, those are based on comps. So other properties in the area that have sold that are very similar in what they have sold for. That's pretty much what your property is worth. When it comes to 5 units and above, it's based on the income approach. So if you have a 5-unit, I'm just gonna do some quick math for you all.
Quick maths, ladies and gentlemen.
If you have a 5-unit and you just increase the rents $10, that's all you're doing. You're just increasing the rents $10, so you're increasing it $50 a month or $600 per year. Now, if you're deciding to sell that property in the next couple of years, and let's just say you sold it at let's just say a 7 cap or something like that, by increasing the rent $600 or $600 increase, that's an increase or positive increase to the NOI, which is the net operating income. That's just your income minus your expenses. So if you increased your NOI $600 on a 7 cap property, you just take 600 divided by 0.07, you just increase the value of that property by $8,500. That's just $10 increase. Now imagine buying a 5-plex and you're doing all this work to the property and you increase the rents, let's just say $50 a month. That's gonna have an exponential impact on the resale value, or if you decide to do a cash out refinance. That's why so many people are able to put in all this money to acquire the property and get that money out, because they raise the value of that property so much. Most investors, like I said, they buy a property, a commercial property, based on the income that's derived from it. So if you're buying something at a 7 cap and you increase the rents $1,000, let's just say $1,000 a year, that's going to have an exponential impact on what the property is worth compared to doing a value add for residential, and you can only sell it for what the comps are, right? I mean, you're not going to buy a property that's worth, let's just say the average houses in the neighborhood is $250,000. You're not going to put all these granite countertops and all this stuff and be like, well, I know the neighborhood over, you got $400K. Well, guess what? That's probably on the other side of Truce or in a more affluent neighborhood. You have to stay within the parameters of that neighborhood, because if the average comes to 250, guess what? Your property is average going to be around 250. It's not going to go much above that.
Right, and one thing that made me think of is like how, you know, if you use, this isn't particularly in the commercial world, but like for a residential property, if you use, you're like, okay, this address, what are the average rents for this address in this, you know, neighborhood, and then you put, you know, how far out do you want us to measure this? 1 mile,
Yeah.
2 miles, 3 miles. It's like, you'll put 1 mile, and I'm like, okay, average rents are $850. You put 3 miles, which doesn't seem like a lot, and
Yeah.
it'll be like $1,200. You like, oh. So that's what it made me think of, is like, you really gotta be within that circle of that neighborhood very closely, or else numbers can change drastically.
Oh yeah.
And if you don't ring your numbers correct, you're gonna end up bottomed out.
It's location at the end of the day when it comes to any properties that you buy. Now, you can buy properties east of Truce and make a really good return. It just kind of comes down, I mean, you're going to have more risk, so you should expect a higher return. I mean, that's the spectrum right there, right? I mean, the higher risk you have on a project, let's just say you're doing a value add or you're doing development or you're holding some land that's on a path for development. You have a lot of risk there, right? If you acquire a property and it's just land and there's no income that you're getting, and there's a downturn and the property values drop, I mean, you're getting hit hard because number one, your property values just went down. Number two, you're paying money each month. So at that point, it's not even an asset; it's a liability because you're not making any money off that land. You're paying the mortgage company to hold that land. Now, because there's higher risk associated with it, which means you can lose everything, you expect a higher return. For most development projects, most people aren't even going to consider them unless it's like an 18% IRR plus.
Man, ladies and gentlemen, he's dropping gems, he's dropping fire. So what I would suggest is that you run this episode back again for later in this week and listen to it again with a notebook. If you're listening and you're driving right now, don't take out a notebook. Please do not pull out your iPhone to take notes. But, run this episode back. Any terms you don't understand, write them down. Do some research on them. Anything that sounded really interesting, write the term down or what you heard that made it really interesting and do some further research. Or, even better, and I don't know how much time he has, but shoot Nathan a DM, shoot him an email, ask him a question. If he has some time, maybe he'll respond. If he didn't, we don't.
Oh yeah, I'll definitely respond. I like helping people out. I mean, people have paved a path for me. I wouldn't be where I'm at right now without my mentors. I'm actually a mentor at UMKC, the block school. So they have a block mentorship program.
Yeah, so how's that been going?
So this is something that just recently started. It's going okay. I just sent a message to him the other day. Just waiting on that response.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're a college student, it is, especially coming straight from high school, freshman to sophomore, it takes a while to get used to because, the classes get a lot harder. But at the end of the day, it comes down to just showing your persistence. That's what college was for me. Number one, it was the connections, the relationships that you built. And then number two, it was showcasing to the world that you were persistent, you were dedicated to get through it. Now, there's a lot of classes like, you have your core classes, and then you have your electives, which, I guess they pair with your course load. That don't even have anything to do with the career path you want to go down, but it's something that's part of the curriculum that you have to take, and you just have to do it. There were so many classes I was just like, why am I doing this? This isn't going to have any impact on my life, but it's something that was required. You got to pay for it and get it over with.
I love it, yeah. And I think I never was a huge fan of school, but one thing it'll teach you that's really important, and I think we've kind of like lightly covered it throughout this podcast, or if you're listening closely, understand that it's necessary. It's just showing up.
Yeah.
You just got to show up.
Honestly, just show up.
You really just got to show up. Honestly, if you did the bare minimum and just showed, not that I suggest that, but I'm just saying, if you did the bare minimum and just showed up to everything in your life, showed up for your relationship, never should you just get bare minimum. But I promise you, if you just show up, though, and everything you do in life, you're going to be okay.
No, you won't.
But nobody wants to just be okay. We want to be great. We want to be amazing. We want to give back to the world. We want to be the best partner. We want to be the best businessman. We want to be the best everything, right?
Yeah.
But if you just show up, bro, you're going to be all right.
Exactly.
That's the problem with the world is we just don't show up enough, not consistent enough. But if we show up and are consistent, like the main lesson you'll learn from school is you'll be all right. If you're 14 years old right now and you're hating high school already, bro, just show up.
I tell people all the time, if you're going to go to college, the two biggest things you should be getting out of college would be the connections, and then probably the number two thing is coming out with the analytical ability. Because with school and a lot of formalized education, they're teaching you what to do and what to think. You don't want to come out of some experience and people, you need to be able to think on your feet and critically analyze situations. If you're just going off of, I think this, but you're very opinionated and you can't back it with fact or anything like that, that somewhat gets annoying because you have an opinion about something, but you can't state why you have that opinion. You have that opinion because other people have that opinion, or someone you respect has that opinion. Okay, their opinion matters, but why can't you go against the status quo? I go against the status quo all the time. You're going to tell me this, I'm going to be like, okay, why is it that way? If you can't explain why it is that way, then you probably don't know enough about the subject as it is.
That's real. Me and my, just fun fact, me and my coworker talk about that all the time. It's like, ask why, and if someone gets pissed off, and when you ask them why, she's probably not the best person to be listened to in the first place. They're like, you should do this with your property or with your real estate. And you're like, okay, cool, but why?
Yeah.
And then they're like, and you're like, yep, all right, no, not to listen to you, right?
Yeah.
So
people provided advice and they don't perform or use the advice that they provide.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to me.
It's hilarious.
Yeah.
It's very funny. Ladies and gentlemen, hopefully you guys have been enjoying this conversation. I think this, we've had a few people in the real estate industry on, but I think this has been the most informational, like most energy, most in-depth conversation I've had about real estate, and that makes me excited and happy, and I hope hopefully the guests enjoyed as well. So I did want to ask you, if you were to describe your situation 3 years from now, what would you want it to look like? When we're talking about the real estate world, when we're talking about your interest in investing and building acquiring assets and growing your wealth and taking care of family, all the beautiful things of life. If you were to think about 3 years from now, where would you want to be? What would you want to be different? I ask this question because once we say it, it's a form of manifestation. Now you just got to go out there and do it. So it's definitely possible. But what does that look like for you?
So two things. So a lot of people are so gung-ho about getting on the investment side of things, but they don't really have a reason for why they want to do that, right? I mean, for me, I want to acquire investments, but right now I'm primarily focused on my active income source. So what I do day in and day out as a commercial real estate agent, I'm trying to grow that active income source up as much as I can so I can have more funds to funnel that into the passive side. Now, like I said, it comes down to your goals and aspirations. I don't have a goal to acquire all this passive income just so I can not work my day job. I like my day job. I enjoy what I do. So for me, it comes down to building wealth and acquiring wealth just because that will allow me to have more time freedom to spend with family and friends and do whatever I want. But when it comes to my active income source, that's my primary focus right now. I mean, one of my goals for this year was to make $100K in my first year. I fell short by half. I mean, I'm probably going to be in the 50,000 range, but it's because I made a goal that's so high that it's almost hard to be attainable. But guess what? Making a goal so high, you're going to surpass what your actual goal was going to be. So, I mean, most people on the commercial side, they don't make any money their first year. I was lucky to make some money my first year. I mean, it's with a lot of help through my mentors, though. But yeah, I would say in the next 3 years, I see myself being on the ownership side of things. My goal by 25, so I turned 24 December 7th. My goal next year is to acquire a property. So it's probably going to be a small incremental development, so probably a duplex, fourplex, something like that. But I'm more of a long-term buy and hold guy. I'm not someone that wants to acquire the property, do a huge value add strategy and then sell it within the next year. That's not my goal. I'm not planning to live off that money anyway. I'm going to live off my active income source, my passive income source. Probably not going to spend any of that money until I get 30 because I want it to, it's compound interest, right? I mean, all the money that you get from your investments, why spend it if you don't need to spend it? Put that money aside, save it, only to acquire more properties because I mean, once you acquire your first property, everything gets a lot easier. Once you can showcase to investors you have the experience or I took this property through the business plan, it's going to be a lot easier to raise capital. So that's actually one of my plans or goals for next year is to acquire and take down a small duplex to a fourplex, and that's going to be through capital that I raise. Now, I'm going to have some money into the deal, right? You want to have some sweat equity or some skin in the game is what they say. Because if you're raising 100% of the funds from investors and this is your first project, you have no incentive when times gets rough right. to continue with that business plan, right? I mean, if you don't have any money into the deal, you're just like, shit, it's hard. I'm just going to stop. Now, all these people have all their money that you just raised capital from into the project. You need to put skin in the game. Like fork up $10,000, $20,000 of yourself and put it into the project. Because for someone that's like me, I mean, I'm 23, $20,000 is a lot of money. That's not something I'm just going to put into a project and when time gets hard, I'm just like, oh yeah, I'm going to quit. I don't want to do this anymore. Plus, this is what I do on a day-to-day basis anyway. I help investors acquire properties. So it's going to be a lot easier for me. Number one, I understand the process. It's going to be a lot easier to raise capital from investors because I know the lingo, number one. I know what it takes to do the asset management side of things because it's There's professionals I've met up with. I mean, I haven't actually done the asset management side of commercial real estate, but I mean, it's through mentors, like I said, through connections, and it's through knowledge or intuition that you get through your experiences.
Man, practice. We talk about practice.
Practice, yeah, it's practice.
Practice? We talk about practice. Sorry, no. Shout out to Allen Iverson.
Yeah.
But no, I love it, man. I love it. I love, I'm not trying to make it sound like you're mad younger than me. I'm 24, you're 23.
Yeah.
But I love that you're so young and you're so, up to date about what's actually going on in your industry. Now, that sounds like, well, that should be an obvious. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's not.
No,
A
it's
lot
not.
of people who are young and they get into a world and they want to act like they know everything because they want to know everything, and that's cool, but you don't need to act like you know everything if you don't. And one thing about this conversation is you're very informed about your industry, you're practicing, you're putting in the work, you're connecting, you're learning, you're applying that knowledge, you're flipping that knowledge, doing it again, you're open to having conversations, you're, writing content. The best thing I learned about learning something is after you learn something to try to share with other people.
Yeah.
That way, I'm sure this conversation will help you out. By just sharing everything you've just talked about, just puts deeper reminders of what this word means, what this is, what this math is. And long story short, all I'm trying to say is shout out to you for, really doing your due diligence in your field and like hustling and learning and actually knowing what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And then coming on here to share this information and this conversation with the listeners. So I appreciate you for that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one thing that I tell people all the time, before you go into any industry, meet out with professionals that are actually in that industry to see if you truly will enjoy it or not. There's so many doctors out there that don't enjoy what they're doing, right? I mean, they're making pretty decent amount, but they don't have time freedom. What I mean by time freedom, that varies. That's something that varies based on the person, right?
Mm-hmm.
But time freedom to me is having time to spend with family or friends or take time off when I want to because I want to travel or do whatever I want to do. You don't have time freedom as a doctor, especially when you're on call or you're working 3 days straight or something along those lines. There's a lot of doctors I've asked this question like, hey, what do you like most about your job? A lot of them say helping people, but for the most part, I would say, what's the thing you don't like? Well, I don't have the time to spend with the people that I love the most. So I'm just like, well, so you're making a lot of money, but you don't have the time to spend that money or utilize that or be on trips with your family or friends or spend time with them. I think that's the biggest thing you can have in life is to actually build relationships and have fun, travel, and experience things that most people don't get to experience.
Right. I think the question I always ask myself and encourage others to ask is the sacrifice worth the value? So it's like, yes, you're helping people. We love it. Also, shout out to all the doctors. Thank you. This is no diss to you or nothing. But it's like, yes, you're helping people. That's awesome. And that's a sacrifice. Your time, your effort, 8 years of school, 6 years for some. Shout out to my boy John, UMKC 6-year medical program now as your residence in New Orleans. Shout out to my boy. But anyways, so is that sacrifice of helping people worth all, like the value? Okay, I get a lot of money, but I don't spend time with friends and family. I don't get to see my daughter. I don't get to do this. It's like, you got to do that math, before you get into an industry. It's like you said, go talk to those people. How much time do you have free to hang out with your family? I get about an hour a night. You know what I'm saying? It's like, oh, okay. Well, maybe this ain't the industry for me then. You know what I'm saying? Understanding that. So that's really important. So I have one statement and then one last question, and we'll wrap it up today. Again, thank you for coming on to the show today, man. The College Stetson Show, formerly known as the Culture Talks podcast. But, the Culture Talks, I love that, all the information you shared. I can't wait to listen back to it myself. Listeners, I hope you enjoyed. Remember, make sure you leave a 5-star review and share this if you enjoyed this conversation or found it interesting or insightful. Please run it back and listen again. Write notes. Do more research. That's how you'll get better. My statement is, I feel like a lot of real estate, people in real estate that really care about what they're doing and really, put in the work, would also automatically be some pretty good operators when it comes to like running a business outside of real estate. Yeah. It's like, economies of scale, cost of goods, like the return on investment, like all these like terms and all the numbers that you have to run, knowing how to, I don't know how to do
it's finance at the end of the day.
At the end of the day, and that's what our last podcast with Reggie Harris. He went into accounting, also went to UMKC, business
Reggie?
school.
Okay.
Yeah. And so he went into accounting, and he was just saying, like, the numbers, man, that'll apply to whatever business you get into.
It does, yeah.
And he's like, if anything, that's the move. If you're gonna go study business in school, you know what I'm saying? It's like, he's like, I'm saying the big move for me was really understanding finances. If you understand the finances, the numbers, you can run the numbers well, it's gonna help you a lot. So I just wanted to say that because I was thinking about the terms you use. I was like, hold up. All this stuff and the data you need to learn how to run, I'm like, this is perfect for an operator of like a business. So, last question of the day, and you came in early, which is on time today, and you heard the end of my last podcast, so you know what I'm about to ask right now, but I'm gonna ask it. Last day on earth, 110 years old, and you've lived out your dreams, you've done everything you needed to do, you know, you've taken care of your family, you've built wealth, you've lived time-free for the majority of your life. But your great-grandkids, they're sitting at your feet, and this is the last thing you get to leave them with, and they ask you, hey, great-grandpa, what's one piece of advice on how to live life? What are you gonna share with them?
I'd say the biggest thing is just to be a value creator. Try to bring value to someone else's life because you never know what someone is going through on a day-to-day basis. Just try to be nice, just try to be helpful, try to be resourceful. I mean, it doesn't matter who it is. I mean, one of the things that I want to focus on when it comes to like certain communities, now there's access to resources everywhere out there, but not a lot of people know where to find it or how to piece it all together. So one thing that I want to do is, I guess, go around to community centers and teach people about building financial wealth. And a lot of people don't understand how to do that. And that's one thing I would say, like, just try to be helpful, try to be resourceful, try to have a positive impact on people's lives. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to be on your deathbed with all these different regrets, saying, oh, I wish I could have done this, I wish I could have done that. Just be nice, and as long as you've had an impact, like, try to have something that people remember you by, and obviously you want it to be a positive thing. So, I mean, just try to give value to people, try to be nice, try to be helpful, because, I mean, you never know what impact one small little statement like, hey, I like your shoes, or something like that is going to have on that person's day.
Absolutely. That's key. I love it. Value add, ladies and gentlemen. Run this podcast back. Write notes. Be nice to people. Be kind. Learn a skill. Do your due diligence before going into an industry. There's so many different things we covered today, so I really hope you guys enjoyed this podcast today. This is the Carl Stetzer Show, so remember that. Not the Culture Talks no more. So I gotta say it on the next 5 episodes to really be there.
That's understandable.
So you can get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Nathan, please share where people can find you on social media, how they can support your efforts, and then we'll sign out.
Oh yeah, for sure. So the two primary platforms, it's going to be LinkedIn and then also Instagram. You can on LinkedIn, just Nathan Roberts. Look up Nathan Roberts, you'll find me. On Instagram, it is CRE with Nathan. That is my commercial real estate handle for my business.
Love it.
Or if you just look up Nathan Roberts _1997, that's my personal account.
You'll find them. Look for the tall, handsome black man. And with that being said, let's all be amazing today.
Let's
I'm
all be
feeling
amazing.
really energized right now, but we got to wrap this up. I don't want to turn up and take this into a 3-hour podcast. So with that being said, 5-star review, share with a friend. Carl Stetzer Show, CIZY.